Life, what is it? As of now, we know that this phenomenon only exists on Earth, but it likely exists elsewhere. Nevertheless, life in the universe is rare. Life first formed around 4 billion years ago and were made of mostly microorganisms. The types of plants and animals we know and love today got their start 130 to 200 million years ago. So for much of Earth's history, the world belonged to the little guys. Humans have been on Earth for around 2.5 million years, but haven't really looked like us until about 200,000 years ago, with a few exceptions. And in the past 10,000 years, our species has exacerbated from agricultural societies to space exploration. However, humans are but one in the estimated 1.8 million species of life that exist on Earth. But what is life? What does it mean to be alive? And no, not in the philosophical sense. I mean, I doubt mushrooms sit around and contemplate these questions, even though some mushrooms help people find those answers. So anyway, biology is the study of life, and biologists still can't seem to answer the very question that it studies.
What is life?
The good news, however, is that there are characteristics that all life seems to share. First, all life is made of one or more cells. These cells are made up of molecules, and in turn, atoms, and some cells contain organelles, which carry out specific functions for the cell. Multicellular organisms are made of millions to trillions of individual cells that can carry out varying functions simultaneously. Living things respond to their environment. If one approaches this prairie dog, it will escape into its hole. Sensitive plants will droop and fold their leaves if touched. Even microorganisms will swim towards or away from a stimulus, and just like me, I'm trying to regain my footing after tripping over a log. Look, I failed, but hey, I tried. Living things are able to make more of themselves. This is made possible by the self-replicating molecule DNA. Most single-celled organisms duplicate their DNA and divide into 2 daughter cells, while multicellular organisms have specialized reproductive cells to make new individuals. These reproductive cells harbor the parent's DNA, but is recombined by both parents to give an offspring that shares many similarities, but are genetically distinct from either parent. So because the environment is constantly changing, species must adapt or they will go extinct. Adaptations are genetic features that make organisms more suitable for their environment. Adaptations help increase the chances of an individual surviving and reproducing in their prospective environment. For example, the great heights of these Douglas firs began as a mutation which provided the slightly taller fir tree with more available sunlight, allowing the tree to have access to more food, and with more food is more energy which can be used for reproduction. That gene was then passed on to its offsprings until generations later, most Douglas firs attained great heights. All life grows and develops based on their genetic instructions. Growth is usually aided by adding more cells, and development is usually controlled based on environmental or hormonal conditions. Since life is complex, even down to the single-celled organisms, they must use multiple regulatory systems. These systems bring in nutrients, expulse waste, and help respond to stimuli, as well as coping with environmental stress. Here's a paramecium using a special structure to rid itself of excess water. Multicellular organisms like ourselves carry oxygen throughout the body, produce waste, and maintain thermoregulation, all at the same time. A major portion of regulation is maintaining homeostasis, or the ability to maintain constant internal conditions. The problem, however, is our external environment introduces changing parameters such as temperature, pH, and exposure to varying chemicals. Because of this, regulatory systems are in place to maintain body temperature, pH, and maintain the appropriate concentration of those varying chemicals. For example, in polar bears, the darker skin underneath the clearer fur, as well as having barrel-shaped bodies, help maintain body heat in cold climates. Likewise, we humans sweat in response to hot climates. And since life is complex and in a constant movement or flux, life requires energy and must acquire that energy from outside sources. Plants, algae, and certain bacteria will take up sunlight and convert it into chemical energy stored in sugar molecules in a process called photosynthesis. Protozoans and bacteria and animals must feed off other organisms in order to receive energy. So while biologists can provide a list of characteristics that life has in common, where do viruses fall? Somewhere between life and non-life, because viruses do reproduce and are subject to adaptations from natural selection, which was really evident during the whole COVID-19 pandemic. They're not really made up of cells. Viruses don't respond to stimuli, and they don't really have any regulatory or energy processing capabilities. In fact, all viruses are parasites that rely on host cell machinery for survival and reproduction. For these purposes, most biologists regard viruses as non-living, but in my opinion, they may be a crucial link to the origin of life on Earth. As mentioned earlier, organisms are highly organized and form a hierarchy from small to large. Atoms make up everything, which is why you shouldn't trust them. That's right, he's got jokes. Anyway, living or non-living, all matter is made up of atoms. Atoms form chemical bonds to make molecules, and like atoms, molecules can be found in living and non-living matter. Macromolecules are large molecules like carbohydrates and DNA that are produced and used by living things. And some cells have aggregates of macromolecules that form little tiny compartments called organelles, or tiny organs, that perform various functions for the cell. The cell is the smallest fundamental unit of structure and function in an organism. When multiple similar cells are bound together and perform similar functions, this becomes a tissue. A collection of tissues that perform a common function are called organs. A group of organs that carry out life processes are called an organ system. In mammals, there are 11 organ systems, including the circulatory, respiratory, nervous, and lymphatic systems, part of your immune system. In plants, organ systems are divided based on nutrient and water transport, photosynthesis, and reproduction. Finally, the working organ systems form an organism, which are individual living entities. Of course, microorganisms usually stop at the cell level of hierarchy. Afterwards, a group of the same species of organisms living in the same area is called a population. These buffalo live and interact with one another, making a population. The same can be said about a forest of loblolly pines. Of course, populations of one species often interact with populations of other species. This forms a community. Here's a mountainside stream community in eastern Kentucky, which contains populations of crayfish and red salamanders. But don't forget the botanical and microscopic members, as well as all the small invertebrates not seen in this particular clip. Finally, an ecosystem includes the community with its abiotic factors. These are non-living components that include temperature, elevation, nutrient availability, water, pH, etc. This body of water, for example, is home to horseshoe crabs that mate every spring. The water is cool and slightly brackish as salt water and fresh water combine. Any drastic changes to these parameters will greatly affect the livelihoods of these wondrous animals. One important aspect of biology is to organize living things into groups. Historically, superficial characteristics would be used to classify organisms into groups. However, if this was still the case, whales and fish would be close relatives. And now we know, using systematics, which is reviewing the evolutionary relatedness of species when considering their classification, we know they're not related. Evolution is the genetic change of a species over time that can lead to the formation of new species. You see, whales are not fish, but evolved from ancient semi-aquatic land mammals most closely related to the hippopotamus. The fish-like body of a whale is a result of natural selection, favoring fish-like bodies in an aquatic habitat to reduce drag. Life is categorized by taxonomy, which is the identification, classification, and naming of species. The modern classification scheme was first developed by scientist Carl von Linné, who later renamed himself Carolus Linnaeus because, of course, he did. In this system, species that are more closely related to each other are put into similar groupings called taxa. The most inclusive taxon is domain, and the most exclusive is species, meaning that only one species is found in that particular category. The taxa are divided into the following: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Here's the taxonomy of the domesticated dog. Notice that the organisms it shares commonalities with decreases as you move down the taxonomy. The reason dogs and wolves are together at the species level is because dogs are essentially domesticated wolves, even that annoying Chihuahua of yours. Linnaeus gave each organism a two-name scheme. The first is the genus and the second is species. The names were Latinized because Latin is a dead language, and the genus being capitalized while species being lowercased. If you write out a species name, you underline it, and if it's typed, the name is in italics. Our species is Homo sapiens, and your pet cat is Felis catus. See, that one was easy. In our next video, we're going to be looking at the process of science and the scientific method.